Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports for your latest Springbok news, a Bokdate, if you will, from Rassie Erasmus, who addressed the media earlier this afternoon and gave a bit of insight into where the squad is currently at in terms of some injuries, in terms of thinking with regards to the Argentina squad, travel plans, as well as kind of some of the logistics in terms of squads for rugby's greatest rivalry tour, which obviously kicks off next week. The All Blacks set to arrive in the country this weekend after Dave Rennie named his squad on Monday, a 44-man strong squad that will travel to South Africa without Artie Sylvia, who will only be linking up with the squad a bit later, and a couple of key players missing for the All Blacks, but some very, very big names in that squad. But in terms of the Springbok squad, though, they gathered on Monday in Johannesburg and have got into a training camp this week. They've had 2 days of training, and we were there earlier today. So if you have not, go and check out the training footage from that session. Bit of Lions practice in the beginning as well, which was quite cool to also see how it all kind of came together. And also very excited, we've got a very cool episode of The Mad Show dropping tomorrow at 6 o'clock with former SA Schools player Brian Scorsano, who played alongside Sia Khaleesi in that SA Schools side. So very cool insight coming from him tomorrow. So make sure you go and wait and check out The Mad Show, aka Maul and Disorder. But in terms of what Rassie Erasmus has had to say about the squad, there are some not such good news with regards to injuries. And the big news is that Oxen chair Franco Mostert not available for Argentina, and confirmation then really that the call-up for Intuka yesterday was Oxen chair related in terms of cover for that. So this is what Rassie Erasmus basically had to say. And in terms of some of the logistics, so the Boks will train again tomorrow, and we'll head off on the weekend, where the players that are not traveling to Argentina will go back home, will go back to their families, and then the players who are traveling to Argentina will depart on Saturday evening and will return the following Sunday. In terms of where the Boks are thinking, Rassie said, first and foremost, we want to beat Argentina just like every other team. We want to win every test match we play. But he said, then there's the bigger picture, which is the Rugby World Cup next year. And it's an interesting balancing act at the moment in terms of wanting to beat Argentina, wanting to get some really good results, wanting to not drop any tests, but building towards the World Cup. And it'll be interesting to sort of see how they navigate, the greatest rivalry tour within that sort of spec, because obviously the Nations Championship we did see rotating. There was definitely an eye on the World Cup next year. Moving forward now, fewer and fewer tests to be able to do that. You don't really want to be rotating at large during rugby's greatest rivalry tour. You want to make sure that you are at your strongest and trying to beat the All Blacks in at least 3 tests and win the series. And then you've got the Nations Championship at the end of the year, and then you're basically into Rugby World Cup warm-up matches. The shortened Rugby Championship is set to return next year. There'll be a single round, there'll be a couple of friendlies, and then we're kind of into the World Cup. So definitely kind of on the final straight, really, as far as World Cup preparation comes in. So in terms of players returning, there were 10 players returning from the sideline injuries, but not all players available, saying the only 2 guys who won't be available for or longer-term injuries are Oxenchair and Franco Mostert. The fact that they have not been released from the squad yet means that I think there is a bit of hope. I mean, Franco Mostert was training today. He was there as part of the group, wasn't taking part, obviously, in probably a lot of the contact stuff, but he was training. Oxenchair, very notable absentee with regards to the training, wasn't spotted at all. And so I think that they'll obviously be optimistically hoping that they'll be fit. The nice thing is we've still got plenty of time until the first test. It's on the 22nd of August. So it's basically a month's time, really. 3 weeks on Saturday still. So there is plenty of time to get some of these players back up to full fitness. And I think the main thing is, obviously, in terms of the squad that will go over to Argentina, to get players into some matchday fitness. So he says, apart from them, everyone is ready to play. I wouldn't say it's ideal that they're all returning from injury. We would have liked guys not to be injured, to have to manage their game time right from the start. He said the same applied to Andre, Eben, Wilco, Sasha, but this game is a really good opportunity. So read between the lines, I think you probably expect those players to play. I think we will see Sia Khaleesi next week and Damien Dealendi, Andre Esterhuizen, Eben, Wilco, probably Morne van der Berg, those sort of players, to be able to give them a bit of game time. And he basically said the big thing in terms of this game is it's been planned with the All Blacks. He says you want to be be able to see where they are. He said it wasn't planned with that reason in mind in terms of seeing who's ready to go to New Zealand. But it is a very, very good opportunity to do exactly that. I think the most interesting part about this is that he has confirmed that there is the potential for players to be released back to their franchises for their franchise game against the All Blacks. He said taking players on tour without being able to give them a game for his franchise against the All Blacks would not be the right thing. But we also don't want to release players if we're not 100% sure we're covered in those positions for the All Blacks tests. So as far as we can release players without jeopardizing the squad depth, we'll try to do so. We might also still release more players from the group if they don't get enough game time in the Springbok tests. That's very exciting, I think, and I'm really glad that there has been addressed, because I was saying it's a pity you're not going to see a Zach Porthen play for the Stormers against the All Blacks, but maybe we might. I think maybe if they sit there saying, well, he's not going to go to Argentina, then maybe it is an argument to say, well, go back to the Stormers next week, train with the Stormers, get some exposure against the All Blacks props. He goes straight back into the Bok camp, and he'll still have 2 weeks in Bok camp to be ready if he's going to be used. So I think you could do a lot of that with some of the players. I think you could see something like Intuka, he's been brought in, but if he's not going to go to Argentina, if he's not going to feature, send him back to the Stormers, get him that game time against the All Blacks, use your franchise to get some of these guys to play. Obviously within reason, you don't want to sort of sit there and dictate to the franchises, all right, cool, you guys have been prepping without this player, now we're going to send them back. But I do think we want to see our franchises at the strongest they can possibly be. There was a rumor going around that, URC players will not be available. That is a rumor. They will be available. We are going to see Evan Roos next weekend, as long as he's fit, playing for the Stormers against the All Blacks. We are going to see, when it comes from like the Bulls, for example, you are going to see Ambrose appear. You are going to see majority of the URC players, your Marcel Coetzee and the likes of that. The Sharks will have a Mapimpi available for them, and a Vincent Koch and those sort of players. So that's I think quite cool to see that there might be some more players that will get released back. And I think it makes sense. At the end of the day, they want to give exposure and see where some of these players are and get information on these players. Obviously, you want to try and do it in a box setup as much as possible, because then you're within the right structures, you're within the box game plan, and you're getting better information with regards to how they play with other people around them. But for example, if you want to sort of see, well, where is Morné van der Berg from a fitness point of view or from a form point of view, and he's not going to play that first All Blacks test, then maybe worth releasing him to the Lions and playing that midweek fixture, and then seeing, well, maybe he plays in the third or fourth test against the All Blacks. Similarly for Aquan Horn, if he's not going to play, the Lions could really use the extra players as well as the experience these players are going to get, and you can go and see, okay, well, how do these players fare against a full international side? Because that's what this All Blacks tour is. You now get an opportunity to play for your franchise against an international team, which is really exciting. And it's a big opportunity for these players to step up. I was watching the Lions training, and you've got Harshim Pede and Bronson Mills, who Rassie Erasmus has named. You've got Nico Stay, you've got Henk van Wyk, players who have been in the lineman camps. You've got Sika Mose Noche back and in South Africa playing for the Lions now, and he'll be desperate to try and get a game against the All Blacks, because these players can go and put their name in the hat. You go and put out a huge performance against the All Blacks, that gets you noticed. Whether it's too late, inverted commas, to go to the World Cup, likely for players who are not entirely involved. But if Aquan Horn goes back to the Lions, for example, and has a stellar game against the All Blacks, you'll sit there and say, yeah, actually, there's something here. We must look at him for the World Cup. So that's what's really exciting about the next sort of 5-6 weeks, is we get to see our players up against quality opposition and really put their hands up. The main thing that Rassie basically said is that we are focusing right now on Argentina. And he said that he saw that this All Black squad was announced, and he had a brief look at it, but at the moment they're locked in Argentina. He might have had a brief look at it. I can tell you right now, the analysts, the behind the scenes, there's a lot going into looking at exactly what that All Black squad is. There'll be a lot of clips being get, especially from the new players. There'll be a lot of preparation being prepared for the All Blacks in terms of an analysis point of view, looking at who they've brought and how they're going to be able to contact that as well. And the big thing is, after the Argentina game, they will announce an official Rugby's Greatest Rivalry squad, which will be the final, and probably smaller than a 43-man squad. I'd imagine they'll go closer to sort of 35, 34 maybe, and be able to hopefully release some players back into the mix. So it'll be interesting to see which Stormers players might already be released to their franchises next week. I'd love to see a Kobus Reinach, if he's not going to play against Argentina, going back to the Stormers, getting that opportunity. As I said, an Intuka getting that opportunity to play for the Stormers and going to make a big difference there. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see. What are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve, and I'll chat to you soon.